gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody in between.
He's a South Texan poppy poet living that hashtag middle-class gay life. It's Chibi.
She's a little bit Selena, a little bit J-Lo, and a whole lot of Pisces. It's Rocky.
And this is Words and Shit,
the show where you get to know the person behind the poetry.
Brought to you by Write Art Out
and Gemini's Productions. Hola, Raquel.
Hola, Jimmy. How you doing?
Good. I am looking forward to the future.
Yes.
And in my future is a trip to New York soon. So you and I will be reunited.
Yeah, reunited.
And it feels so good. I'm going to blame the virtual leg.
Yes.
But we were talking about, so, you know, we probably mentioned this on the pod beforehand, but
Yes.
I love musicals.
You do.
And we were talking about going to go see some musicals while I was there. And you mentioned Hades Town and how you've never seen it.
I have never seen it. And it's been on my list since I think before the pandemic, just because it won so many awards and it just seems different. But at the same time, I think when I was like, oh, Hades Town, does it have to do about like Hades and Persephone? And it actually does. And I think it got like really excited because, you know, as all of us poetry English majors, I think the first classical mythology, I'm like, want to be an asshole and be like, other than the Bible. But like in the classroom, again, I was like, I was also introduced to, like I went to a Catholic school, so never mind. But like, like mythology, right? Was in high school with like Greek mythology. I feel like everybody was like assigned the same Greek mythology like book that was like this thick, and we all had to write it for freshman year of high school.
Maybe. I don't know if you know this about me, but I love Greek mythology. Love. I took a Greek and Roman mythology class in college, which actually counted. I was like one class away from being a religious studies minor. And,
what?
Yeah, so close. And I have a series of books on Greek mythology. When Assassin's Creed Odyssey came out, and I got to be a hero in the Peloponnesian War and encounter all of these like Greek myths, I was here for it. I love mythology, and I think because I love storytelling and the idea of how like these are essentially parables, right? Mm-hmm. That teach these life lessons and now have become, you know, synonymous with, you know, like things that we see, right? We talk about like narcissism, right? Comes from the Narcissus, right? All of these things that have like stemmed from these stories that we tell to each other. And I'm curious, do you have a favorite myth?
I was thinking about this. You know what? Let's go back to like my favorite introduction to mythology, and obviously it is Athena. I love Athena. I wanted to name my first kid Athena. If I were to have a kid, I was like Athena, and then in Spanish they can be like Athena. I think mostly around like women, right? So I think it's like, and like people with wisdom, or just like are just like really strong, prevalent mythos of women. So if it was not that, it was then when I learned in college the more so of like the Nawa and just like Aztec goddesses of like Colicle, and then Coyoxauhqui, and then obviously Tonantzin, which is our version, or she is like the version of the Virgen de Guadalupe, right? In that mythology, has always really interested me. So everybody, my mom always says like, you're so Catholic. I'm like, I'm not Catholic. I just have the mean hen in everywhere because the mean hen is brown, and she was literally the missionaries went to like the sacred hill where the indigenous people really loved like Tonantzin, and we're like, well, you say Tonantzin, but it's really the Virgen de Guadalupe. So yeah, having a friend.
I've been trying to dive more into the myths and legends of local Native Americans and Mexicans cultures, but maybe I'm biased to this one because I was in a play in college about the myth of Eros and Psyche.
Ooh.
And I think it's just this beautiful story of someone who goes to extraordinary lengths, to be with the person that they love and bring them in, right? So I played Zephyr.
Ooh. Okay.
So yeah, I don't ask a Gemini to pick favorites, friend. But I love how we can use these references of mythology to then create our own myths about ourselves, right? Or how we see ourselves or compose ourselves throughout the world. And this subject of myth was one that we dove into quite heavily with our guest on our conversation today, an old friend of the pod and one of our favorites. We don't play favorites, but we do have favorites.
We do. Let's not lie. We're just like parents say they don't have favorites. That's a fucking lie.
And as you listen to this conversation, you will find out why. Ayo is one of our favorites. So let's just get into it. Our guest today, Ayokunle Falomo, is a Nigerian American and the author of Autobiomythography, coming out from Alice James Books this year, September 10th, 2024. Pre-order now. Also the author of AFRICANAMERICA'Nt from FlowerSong Press, 2 self-published collections, and African American from New Delta Reviews, selected by Selah Saterstrom as the winner of the New Delta Review's 8th annual chapbook contest. A recipient of fellowships from Vermont Studio Center, MacDowell, and the University of Michigan's Helen's Zell Writers Program, where he obtained his MFA in creative writing in poetry. His work has been anthologized and widely published. Google him.
Yes, just Google him.
This is our conversation with Ayo. Ayo, welcome to the show.
Hi.
For those who don't know, Ayo was like one of my first people that I interviewed when I was on Words and Shit. So this is like beautiful reunion.
Episode 2, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, it was. It was like episode 2.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And I was just like, I was blown away by your work. And I'm just so excited to see you like years later to just see how much of your work has like developed even more. It was already brilliant, but I'm just like, how can you get even more brilliant every single time, Ayo? Like, I can't imagine it. So it's so bittersweet. That, and then you've also been like an avid like Words and Shit listener too. I remember like during the pandemic.
I love y'all.
Ayo is like the biggest Words and Shit fan. I always see you commenting. I'm like, yes, friend. And just for anyone that's listening and discovering Ayo for the first time, Ayokunle Falomo is your favorite poet's favorite poet.
Yeah.
Let's just put that out there. Okay?
1,000%.
You're in for a real treat. I also, for anyone that's watching this, I love that Ayo is coming to us from Morgan Freeman's version of heaven. Just this nice empty white space. Here we are. It is infinite, and the only thing that exists in it is this beautiful creature before us. So.
Y'all are wonderful. I'm so glad that like Words and Shit is still going on and going strong. And like over the years, like credit to y'all because like the people that you've had on this show, wow, I don't know how, I'm like wow. I'm wowed like every time by each episode that I get to listen to. So yeah, I'm a fan.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I know. I like when you popped up on the screen again. When you, I was getting emotional. I was like, not only do we get to like have another reunion with you, but at the same time, you are like one of our favorite listeners, and I think one of our best listeners, our favorite ones, who always comments, who always just like shows up and just like posts about us all the time. So thank you, as a poet and as a listener. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Well, Rocky, let's dive in.
Yes. Yes. So basically, you know the deal. You know my question. So are you ready, Ayo?
Let's go.
Great. So, friend, how's your heart doing?
Yes. Yes, heart is hearting,
Mm.
Um, I kind of had this realization recently about how many feelings there are. I was in a therapy session with my therapist, and she was like, we were doing kind of this exercise about like feeling and thinking, because if you're like somebody who like you're intellectualize your feelings, right? You understand what your feelings are, but you're not necessarily feeling them, right? So she was like walking me through. I was like, damn, there's a lot of feelings. Like,
Yeah.
it's not just sad, mad, disappointed. She was like listening. I was like, whoa, have I ever experienced that before? What? So my heart is like in a place where it's feeling a lot right now.
Mm.
There's a lot of shifts. There's a lot of changes happening in my life. There's a lot of transition. So like things to look forward to, uncertainty. So yeah, it's learning how to feel all of it, which is a lot. But yeah.
No, I get that, especially both personally and just globally. There's a lot to process and to go through, and luckily we have a wonderful outlet known as poetry in which we get to process these
Luckily
feelings,
we do. Yes.
which is a double-sided sword in and of itself, because it's like we get to process these feelings, but then we have to sit with them for a while, and then like intellectualize them, right, in the editing process. So yeah, it's a lot, but we
And
are.
worse, if you're a writer, you also get to like share that with other people to feel too.
Yeah.
So it's not enough that you're feeling it and you're like, ooh, there you go. You feel them too.
Yeah,
Uh, it's
it
weird.
isn't misery loves company. It's poetry loves company.
It really
It's
Yes.
does.
like, here are all my feelings, and now you get to feel them with
You
me.
get to feel them too.
I love it. Well, I can't wait to dive in to this conversation, your new book, and all your feelings. But to kick us off, we like to do a quick amuse bouche, if you will, a palate, not cleanser. We're not there yet. We've barely started. A sampling of who you are with a round we call speed dating. So we're going to ask you a series of questions. Feel free to answer them as concisely as you feel is necessary to justify your answers. So, question number one. If home was a verb, what would it be?
Oh gosh, you start off with
No, I'm
with
so
home. Ooh. Uh, home would be stay.
Mm.
Ooh,
Yeah, yeah.
that's a good
Home would
one.
be stay.
Ooh, I was like, can we sit with that? Can we stay
We
with
say,
that?
Yeah.
Ooh, ooh. This is again why you're one of our favorite poets. I know, like, brilliant. All right, so my question is in Spanish we have these things called dichos, right? Or like I guess idioms or phrases. So
Mm.
I want to know like what's your favorite like idiom or favorite like saying?
Hmm. Uh, I love idioms. Like if there are people who don't know, I like idioms for me are are very foundational. Like for my work, one of the pretty cool things that I actually do love about idioms too is because like they're so ingrained, in our cultural like memory, right, and our cultural psyche, that sometimes we don't recognize that these are like things that have like carried over for like a long time, and it's just like normal, right? Uh, but what I love about in my work at least is like kind of like flipping them, right? Turning them into
Yes.
something new, right? So if you have something like charity begins at home, which I really love, instead of saying charity begins at home, what if you kind of like flip that a little bit and say something like begins at home, right? Something like that. Uh, I don't know if I particularly like have a favorite idiom though, but like any of the uh, sayings that have something to do with home. I really, I have an essay that I wrote like last month. I wrote it a while ago, but it got published last year. It's called "On Feeding a Fed Horse." Uh,
Hmm.
and the expression like beating a dead horse.
Hmm.
Yes.
So I was reading something by PETA, the animal rights organization, that was saying, for people not to use that, right? To not say beating a dead horse, and so the alternative was feed a fed horse.
Oh.
Right. Instead of saying like killing, which is like whatever. Doesn't right? It doesn't really do anything. But and then they had another one that was like instead of killing two birds with one stone, it's like feeding two birds with one scone.
It's like so up your alley for flipping them. But yeah, I love it. I love it. Yes.
Uh,
I Go ahead.
you
I
go.
Okay, I go. It's just yeah, I love that. I love these, like, especially the charity begins at home, and clarity begins at, or the clarity begins at home too. Cuz hopefully, throughout our conversation, the readers are and listeners too will get to know that you do use different phrases from home throughout your writing, specifically in this new book. So, just a little sneak peek.
That reminds me of the phrase. Have you heard the saying of like eating the frog? Right.
Oh.
Rocky's like, no.
No.
It's a phrase of like, do the hardest thing first, right? Eat the frog,
Oh.
right? Because normally you put the hardest thing off until the end, and then you don't actually ever get around to doing it, whatever. So like, eat the frog. And I heard somebody be like, oh well, as a vegetarian, I don't like this saying. Uh, I'm like, okay, okay, whatever. But that beautifully transitions me into my question. I don't remember if we did this when we had you on the show, if we did speed dating or not.
We did.
Okay, we did. All right, then you know that this question is coming, and it may have changed. It may be the same. What's your favorite thing to eat?
Ah. I still soup, I probably said soup last time, it'll
Yeah.
always be soup.
But what kind of
Always,
soup?
you
Let's
know.
what? Yeah, what kind of soup?
All kinds of soup. Pho, is like uh, my favorite for around this time, I suppose. But actually, so me and my daughter now we have something now that we do on Sundays, and so Sundays is Soup Sunday now, uh, which started like a couple weeks ago. So it's going well so far. Uh, and last Sunday we made, this is new to me. We made this like miso red curry dumpling soup,
Mm.
which is really good. So I love soup. So that one was like my favorite. And then like the week before we made like this orzo uh, lemon pepper like soup. So yeah, soup of all kinds. I'm here for it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Right now. I have coffee soup. Coffee.
I have tea soup, so
Yeah.
So we can get something to eat right after this.
Oh man, it's like the best time to eat soup, right? It's not when it's cold; it's when it's, I don't know why, but our family would always make soup during the summertime.
all year round, all year round, it's soup
Sure.
season.
Amazing. All right, so this is my last question for our speed dating. Um, what is your favorite myth?
Oh, y'all are good. Oh, you start with home and okay. Okay, all right. Wow. Wow. I think my favorite myth has to be the Yoruba origin story. It is hands down I won't say like, let me not say the best myth, but like it really, for me, uh, it is foundational for me. And I've also like taught it to my students when we're talking about like mythology, right? It's like let me tell you the one that I grew up with. Um, so it's the story of how like creation came to be. It's also like a very I think of it as a very inclusive origin story as well. So there's this idea of God, the divine being sending one of his messengers uh, from the you know heavens or whatever. He has a chain in his hand. He has a calabash with sand. He has a chicken, right? And he's climbing down, and he spreads the sand all over the face of the water, right? And then drops the chicken on the newly formed land. The chicken scatters sand everywhere, which is why we have sand, right? But in the process of like doing that, there's like rivalry between him and the brother, right? Somebody gets drunk, right? Somebody starts creating human beings, but they didn't come out quite right. Uh, and instead of like banishing them, there's like an embrace of differences, right? So yeah, I love that story. It's a lot more expansive than that. That's the condensed version, but I love that story a lot.
Cool. I've never heard of that creation story though, and it's that's what myths are for. It's just so beautiful, and it's just like different creative stories of how the world works.
Yeah,
But yeah, great. Because I've heard of Urba, right? Urba?
yeah, you're right. Yeah,
Urba,
that's
yeah,
the
Urba.
tribe I'm from. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've heard that name before, specifically I think in like Santeria like
Mm,
area.
mm, yeah, they're very, very heavy into that. Yeah.
But yes, so great. Thank you so, so much. And I think with this leading into the mythology of your favorite, stories to now the mythology of you. Ah.
Y'all are good. Yep.
It's like we've been
Yep.
doing this for years.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You have this new book out, right? Um, and we're excited to hear some of your poems from this new book. So, if you please, can you bless us with your first poem?
Yeah, I'll start with the what is kind of the title poem for the book, and it is called Autobiomythography. In the beginning, there was a garden, and then a fire, except it was no fire. But what to say of the furnace that was my mother's womb, and my father, without whom there'd be no kindling. I must be ash. I mean to say, I was born the son of a god whose throne you could not approach. Imagine it, the hymn of my immaculate blossoming. Oh, let me sing myself a song that's yet unsung. I, the son of a gong, son of a pitch too holy for the devil's mouth. Let me christen myself the son of a sun, and I will bask in my own light. Son of a phoenix, I walk out of every flame robed in a coat that can't be taken off. Some secrets even the moonlight can't reveal. My father, he must have lost his wings to the fire. Unblushing, I was born under a furtive sky. I mean to say, the body is a country, this tangled history of flesh, bone, and blood. But who asked for it? My skin, this garment of fur, a flag forever in love with the flame. First of the flock, I was born by a river. I was carried here, hanging on the beak of a bird whose name I do not remember. My mother, she was my first home. Her mother, too, her first. Ask me what it feels like to be so far away from home, and I will say, I did not come here of my own accord.
Okay. Okay. Let me just say that when I read this poem, my immediate thought was like, how can I teach this to everyone? Because it is brilliant.
Yes.
Thank you, Chibi. Thank you.
You do such an incredible job of weaving things together, right? You mentioned your favorite myth being the origin story, and this is kind of like your origin story. But then there's also the myth of Icarus kind of hidden in there. There's
Yeah.
there's so many different iconography. I don't know if I'm using that word correctly,
Yes.
right? But yay! So many different ways that you're bringing the outside world in, and then using that as a way to express yourself. Can you talk? I don't know if there's a question here, but outside of just compliments, but can you talk a little bit about that? In that, okay, I'm just going to weave these two questions together. Also scattered throughout your book, there's a lot of after poems. There's a lot of epigraphs. You have a whole series on self-portraits, which are poems based off of paintings, right? So again, this idea of bringing the outside world in as a way to tell your story. Go, talk.
Where to start? That's a question that I spent that I've spent, I would say, the past 7 to 8 years trying to answer. So I don't let me see how I can kind of get into that. I mean, for me, I don't necessarily know how to. I know there are a lot of writers who can just I guess sit by themselves, right, and write, right, and have no, I won't call it noise, right, have no kind of
External.
yeah, like anxiety of influence or whatever we might call it, right? No external. I'm not that kind of writer. I'm not that kind of person, right? Um, And so, to me, every poem, whether it actually has the after, somebody next to it, every poem to me is an after poem, right? Uh, like, it might not be directly, right, after a writer, right, or a singer or an artist, right? It might be, shit, it might be after my father, right? Because I just literally had a conversation with him, right? And now my brain is turning, right? It might be after, a random person that I met at a gas station, but we typically don't do that, right? We don't go after man that asked me for $50 at the gas station, and I said no, and now he wants to fight me. Right? We don't typically do that, right? But every poem essentially is modeled right after an experience, an encounter, right? So to the best of my ability, I try to like honor that, right?
Mhm.
There is something in the poem. I can literally look at any poem in the book and go, oh yeah, that's a Nif, right? That's Rosgay, that's right. That's Danae Smith, that's Chibi, that's Eris, right? That's Ebony, right? All of
Mhm.
these like influences that have kind of like that I've encountered over the past years, even if they're not, direct, like I am aware of that. Um, and yeah, and also like they are in the room with me. Every person that I've ever read, every person that I've ever had a conversation with, they are in the room with me when I'm writing, right? Now, whether or not I acknowledge that on the page is like something different, I think. But that is always like true for me, and it will continue to be true. Uh, for this poem, I say that to say for this poem, and I mentioned this in the notes section of the book. The poem actually would not happen if I wasn't like I was teaching a writing workshop to high school students at HSPVA, and I had given them a prompt, and I took words. So I had this like book by Harriet Mullen with me. That's like a a compilation of like I think three of her books, and they're like recycled, right? So like she's doing interesting things with like kind of bringing her work together in a new way, right? So what I did was I took 9 words right out of that, and I go, here are 9 words from this book. Try to use the 9 words. There are words that typically people would not use in poems, right? Here are 9 poems that you can incorporate into what you're writing. So we did free write for a little bit. And then, I will give them the word. Now, here's the word, right? Make sure that it fits in. And I did that exercise with them. And then I was like, you know what? This is actually fire. Let me see if I can do it too, right? And so I did. And then, I liked what I wrote. But this is something that I've been trying to write for a long time. And
Mhm.
so there are like, pieces from everywhere in my notebook, in my notes app, in my email, that I was just like sitting down and like trying to see like, how can I make this all fit?
Mhm.
And eventually I was able to kind of like, figure out a way to like make it fit. Um, I love myths a lot. So I'm very happy that you caught on to like the Icarus like myth in there. It's not like staring at you in the face, but it's there. If you're familiar enough with like any of the popular like mythologies, right? There is the myth of the phoenix in there too, right? There are some other myths in there from my tribe. Stuff like that, like kind of like scattered throughout. There is also like the biblical myth in there, even though it's like there is like a little bit of subversion like going on in there. So yeah, all of that to say is like the world is my oyster, I guess.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
So yeah.
Oh my goodness. No, this new work, Io, is phenomenal.
Thank you.
It really,
Thank
not only that, I know our listeners can't see even though how you format some of your poems. That's why they need to go and get your book
They
because it's
should. They should. I think everyone should get this one.
Coming
Yeah.
coming out September 10th on via Alice James.
Alice
Alice
James.
James. Alice
Yeah.
James.
Alice James books.
It
Yes.
comes out 2 days before my birthday, which makes it even more special. I was trying to see if it could come out exactly on my birthday because it is. They were
Virgo.
like,
You're
they
such
were
a
Uh,
like,
Virgo.
sir,
birthday
sir.
didn't land on a Tuesday. Tuesday. So
Like, sir, publishing happens on Tuesdays.
I don't know
No.
that role, but yeah, publishing
That is
happens Tuesdays.
that is hilarious. It's such a Virgo thing to say.
I was like, fair enough, fair.
I love this. As we were looking at this copy, I feel so honored that we got like an advance copy. As we were looking at this like copy of your work, you talk about a lot of your myths and different writers that are seen through like your writing style too. The last time we talked to you, you were getting your MFA in writing. Yeah, you were. I know. I was like, you didn't have your MFA. You were like in the process of.
Oh wow! Yeah.
From the bleak winter of Michigan.
Wow.
Yeah, and you weren't a father yet. No, but it's interesting because this book is like this mythology of yourself, right? And you've always touched upon your like very Nigerian roots. Like you always talk about it. It's very prevalent. But I kind of want to know, like, in doing so and this like creating this mythology for yourself now, because I've seen there's like some poems that are talking about you now being a father. Like, what mythology or what stories are you trying to also write into this so for your daughter as well?
Yeah, the book is dedicated to her. The previous book was dedicated to her too, and for me, it is. I mean, everyone is doing this, so I don't think I'm like this is like special. But I dedicated it to her, and I said as record, right? Because to me, it's like a record of a life, right? The kind of person that she gets to know, I feel like as a father, right, is very much going to be different from the the versions of myself in the book, right? And so just to give a sense of like this is how from my perspective at least my life has been shaped by these people. My life has been shaped by these experiences, right? There are conversations that I'm sure we'll have, right, about them, right, in the future. But just to have a documentation of like this is my life, right, as I understand it, right, as I'm trying to understand it, I think is important, right? Even if, it never gets published, I still think that's a very important thing for someone to do. So that's kind of how I'm like taking it. Ultimately, what I want for her to like get from this process of like investigating who you are is that like all of this stuff is like malleable, right? To a certain extent, right? You're not committed to being, the version of you that you were in 2014 for the rest of your life, right? And to the best of my ability, this is like me trying to show her an example of what that might look like, right? You have the opportunity to shape yourself and your life, right, for the rest of the time that you're here. And I hope, the book is like a testament of what that can look like for her, right? Specifically for her, but also for anybody who might, pick up the book. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very special, especially since you dedicated for her record, because I don't know that many people who have parents who are poets that are like, here is an example of who I am as I was 30, 35 for you to read. This is how I understood life, which just adds so much like different layers to your book and your writing as well. So.
And we talk a lot we have talked a lot this season, maybe every season on the show about the work of poetry as archival work, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And you definitely have a long history of kind of like self archival, if you will. I was actually going back. You said 2014, so your first book was called "Thread: This Word Weaver Must," and then shortly after you came out with Kindred, which another great example of you just taking something and flipping it on its head. And then your chapbook African American, African comma American from New Delta Review, and then your full length African American'T from FlowerSong, and now Autobiomythography. Is definitely a journey through through the self, right? I think for people that have been a fan of you and your work, we've seen that kind of like growth of who you are and how you understand yourself in this world. Can you talk a little bit about that process and how you landed on this one that seems to be very autobiographical, but very myth-based versus something that feels more like rooted, like Kindred, right?
Yeah. This is kind of my dilemma now at this point, because I am very, very, very exhausted and tired of autobiography, like completely. And so, there is still stuff that need to be addressed. There is still stuff that I'm trying to figure out about myself, about my family, about my two countries, which are all just like extension of the self in a way, right? Because a country is never the country by itself, right? It's the country as each person understands it, right? So there's like a kind of mirror situation happening there too. People, right, either friends or family members are not exactly who they are. All right, but like our experience, our perception is like shaping who they are in our minds, right? um so that is exhausting to just like be constantly, I feel like, mining yourself, your family, right, for stories to tell. And the unfortunate part is that most of these stories that we're mining in the first place are not pleasant stories. They're tragic stories, right? So they're traumatic stories. And so you're having to like relive, the stories, right? That you weren't even present for, right? To a certain extent, maybe now I can be a little bit grateful that there were things that my dad did not share with me, no matter how much I pestered him, right, to like want to know, right? He was always like, "Why do you want to know that?" And I'm like, "That's important too." And he's like, "No, it's not." Right? And it just like shut me down. And so like trying to get to the stories that I know are there, right? That I feel like are important for me to tell, right? For my own self without having those stories, right? It's kind of where the myth comes into play.
Mm.
It's like, well, if I don't have access to those stories, there are other stories that I have access to that can still do that work of like standing in for, like I might not have the full story, right? But there are things that I know, there are things that I am aware of, there are things that I assume, right? And I'm not right, it's not a memoir, right? uh so I'm not obligated to facts in the same way that like a memoir would. And
Mhm.
so that was my way of like getting to ultimately the truth, right, of my life, the truth of my family, the truth of my countries, right? Even if I don't have all the facts, right, I still have stories that are cultural, right? I still have stories that are national to a certain degree sometimes. Even if I don't have all of my, like I have spent 5 hours in a library, right, trying to find the book that would tell me what, you know, Nigeria or like this specific part of Nigeria was like in, 1852, because of some personal connection to my family, but I can't find it, right? And nobody can tell me what that is, right? Uh, option one is to just give up, right? And just go forget this story, right? Option two is to go, okay, I have something that I can like work with here. And ultimately, if I'm trying to get to the point now where I'm like, imagination is actually kind of key for me. And I want to return to that 6-year old me who like picked up a pen and just like was making stuff up, right? Yeah, like I do want to return to that. So that's kind of where that mythology is like coming from. Like, oh, I can actually just play, right? And if somebody reads the poem and go, that's not accurate, and go, well, yeah, it's not. That's because I made it up. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. You know, it's so funny because it's like we're at this point where we are now like slowly becoming the elders in our family, right? I know Chibi's like, no, but like we are. We
We're the
totally are.
aunties now.
Yes. We're the
Uncle.
very aunties and uncles, you know, like we're very much there, but we're entering into this, I feel it at least, into this era of being an elder. And from our elders, you know, they too have stories that they also have made up to quite a bit.
Yeah, to cope with their lives, you know.
Where, you know, their friends and family is like, I don't remember that. You're making that up. They're like, this is how I saw it.
All the superhero moments that never happened, you know. Yeah. Yeah, go on, Dad. Tell me about that time you saved 25 people from a drowning. Yeah, a drowning house on fire. Yep, of course.
Rescued a baby from the ocean without spilling a drop of beer.
Yeah.
Right.
So interested to see this like in real time. Like you are this like stepping into your being an elder, right? And you're like, I'm going to create this mythology of and through my perspective and like what my family has done, which is it's very healing, right? We're using this mythology in like very healing ways of them instead of like this grandiose, so like obscure ways of just like, let me lift up only myself, but you're lifting up like your family and multiple generations. So I think this is a perfect time to ask for a second poem to continue the mythology.
You know, there was another poem I wanted to read, but I think this is kind of perfect for what we've been talking about. So I have this poem in the book called Two Truths and a Lie, and it's arguably my favorite poem in the book. Just because, you know, and it kind of ties into like what we've been talking about just making stuff up. But, you know, one thing I'll say, like underneath the current of like just, you know, saying things that are sometimes not true is also, you know, like a layer of truth, right? And for me, it is a way to also protect, right, myself, right, and also like my family members who did not sign up for this, right? So, you know, it's doing both, where it's like I can say the things that are hard to say, right? Even if they're lies, right? But at the same time, I'm also like protecting them. So one thing I'll say is like none of the things in this poem are true. None of them are lies either. So, Two Truths and a Lie. And it is after Chris Abani with thanks to Bill Moran. My father loves me. I am my father's son. I am my father's first son. My father is the only son of his father. I do not know much about my father. I know a lot about my father. My father is a myth. He is a sculpted ghost with marble wings. I have my father's smile. He likes to smile in pictures as much as I like taking selfies. My father does not like taking pictures. As a boy, I did not smile in pictures. No pictures exist of my father as a boy. My father is no myth. My father was once a boy. I am afraid to ask my father if he remembers what he remembers about being a boy. My father is a god. He's Zeus to be precise. Translated, my middle name means my God is arrived. My father is a quiet man. My father's silence is loud sometimes. My father is an angel. My father is not a lawyer. Lawyers are very good liars, I've heard. Poets, too, if I'm honest. My father once wanted to be a lawyer. My father knows a lot. He knows a lot about history, the history of his country. I don't remember much. My father's middle name translated means God remembers. My father was once a teacher. My mother was a nurse. For 30 years, my father was a psychiatric nurse. My father is a correctional officer. My mother is a nurse. When I was a boy, my father tended to a garden. My father tilled the earth as a boy. I am jealous of everything my father has ever planted. In Okiokbo, we lived in a very small compound. In Balamanduro, we raised goats and chickens and rabbits and pigs. My mother does not like pork. The pigs were well fed. They made your mama so fat jokes about each other. Come Christmas time, we'd kill them. My mother loves cooking. She doesn't mind cooking pork. I've never killed anything. I'm lying. I killed a chicken once or twice. Once or twice. I've held a rat in my hand and did not kill it. Instead, I let it go. I felt like God. I have a hard time letting things go. People too. When I was a boy, my father and I did not see eye to eye. My eyes are often red. I have trouble with sleeping, staying asleep, and also staying awake. My favorite color is red. My mother's is brown. My father's is blue. When I was a boy, my mother did not have a car. My father had a red Volkswagen Jetta. He drove it before I was born until we both left my mother and siblings for a new country. Sometimes I wish we didn't. I'm glad we did. I remember before they stopped the family trips we'd take. When I was still a baby, my mother left me briefly with my father. I remember my mother in labor inside my father's car. My mother still experiences labor pains sometimes. I remember the ride to the hospital. Which of my siblings she was pregnant with, I do not remember. I'm lying. It was my sister. I remember carrying each of my siblings. I remember feeding them. I remember changing their cloth diapers. I remember washing each soiled diaper by hand. I am a father now. I stole my siblings' baby food, milk, sugar, Milo, and Bornvita too. I was a naughty child. When I was much younger than I am now, I poured an entire tin of Bornvita into a bucket of water. The sun was out that day. Lucky enough, my mother didn't beat the daylight out of me. My mother has only beaten me once. Once, my mother tied me to a bench while she slept. I untied myself. She cried when she woke up because she couldn't find me. My father is not the type to cry. My father's never laid his hands on my mother the way a prophet might on someone in need of deliverance. My father isn't much of a disciplinarian. He'd rather talk to you than whoop your butt. Once, though, in Balo it gave me a beating I'll never forget. Welts formed on my skin. There was blood. I had pushed my brother Ayodele into a wall. His forehead split like an atom. It was an accident. We were running outside in the backyard. My mother sutured the wound. Once, my mother cut me with a razor. I have scars. Once, My half sister poured hot water on herself. She has a scar on one side of her face. My father once fell from a mountain bike. He has a huge scar on one of his knees, right or left. I don't remember. My father loves me. I am my father's son. I am my mother's first son. My father is his father's.
You you have an amazing way of weaving.
Wow.
weaving weaving things together, weaving words, weaving narratives that I think is very evident in this poem. Thank you for sharing that. I love that you talked you talked a little bit at the beginning about how you like to take things and just kind of like turn them on their heads, right? And so oftentimes with poetry, people assume it to be factual or autobiographical, right? When I'm reading Ada Limon, I assume she did sit on the back porch and contemplate the leaves turning, right? This does not, to me, feel hypothetical or made up. And so this idea of like two truths and a lie, wherein like we're trying to parse through what is a truth, what isn't a truth, and the freedom that it gives you to just create, right? Are you on the poet to novelist pipeline right now? Is that what's happening?
Yeah.
Inquiring minds want to know.
No, I mean, so here's the thing. I actually started my writing life in fiction.
Oh.
I started when I started writing as a child. I started by creating stories, right? By making things up. So I mean, there's a part of me that like wants to return to that. Now, I would say though, I don't think I'm on the poets to novelist pipeline. I'm not, but I am on the poets to short story collection
Oh, okay.
Ooh.
pipeline for sure. I have this idea for like a linked short story collection that I'm kind of that I'm excited about. So it's been nice to. I haven't worked on it in a little while now, but I'm looking forward to returning to it.
You're giving me Philip B. Williams vibes. Okay, like
Um,
I'm just saying, there's something here that you
that
could.
that book is huge, though. I can't do that.
Yeah.
I can't do that. You
Yes, you
know.
can. Yes, you can.
Ooh,
I know.
I admire people who write novels. My brain also doesn't really. If I write a novel, it would have to be like vignettes type stuff. Like I can't
Mm.
write a like a like follow the plot all the way through to the end kind of novel. Ooh, that's terrifying.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
there's something there.
Yes.
But,
I mean,
but
like, for me, even too, like, I'm thinking, like, the one that is so prominent right now is, like, Elizabeth Acevedo, right?
mm,
With, like, she's
yeah,
poetry, spoken word, and now
yeah,
her novels are in poetic form.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you could do that.
yeah.
Never
And
say
also,
never.
to shout out another writer that we know and love, Jasmine Mendez. The novel in verse, form. She's killing it. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I'm just like, there's so many questions I have for you. But we're just like close to the end, and I'm just like, should we have one more question, or should we like one more question? Okay, perfect. Um, Again, this poem that you had, um, we're talking about your format, right? You're like going into more. It's still poetic form. It's prose too. Um, but I've always really loved the way that you formatted all your poems, right? You've had some like on the page that are like sideways, you know, sideways. Some of them are redacted too, right? And they're just kind of like, you know, the words are floating all through the page. So, and again, you've always played around with formatting, but as you're, you know, like you are now creating this mythology for yourself. You're using your imagination even more. You said it specifically in this book. I want to ask you, how did you see your format lend itself for you to being super creative, and what was your favorite way of making this format very creative in your own style?
Yeah, I think that's the thing that I love about poetry. It's like the freedom that it allows, right?
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not you are aware that you're writing a book or not, I think for me at least, it's just being like like staying true to what the poem requires, like each poem, right? Because, you know, and I kind of was nervous about this while we were doing like the copy editing for it, because like all the poems are so different, right? Like, you know, how is how is the whole thing gonna come together when there are, you know, and like each poem has its own rules, and there are even, you know, poems that like from section to section the rules are different, right? And so like how do I honor that while still like remaining like, you know, conscious about like the overall thing that we're trying to work on. And I am so grateful for Julia, my copy editor, who also understood that and was like, you know, let's just try to be consistent, right? To have, and because consistent doesn't mean that you have to have like each, you know, line capitalized throughout, right? The entire collection. But if that's what you're gonna do for this poem, just let's make sure that we do that right throughout. You're using the ampersand, you know, in this poem, but like you're spelling out the word "and" in another poem. That's fine. Let's just make sure that for this poem we stick to one, right? So that it's not the ampersand and also you spelling it out. Which one do you want to do, right? So it's like still remaining true to like each, you know, the heart of each poem, because you know like the family country poem, for example, like I don't know how else to write that poem except to write it as, you know, the flag of the Nigerian flag, right? And the way that I understand flags is like they're not, you know, they're not like straight, they're not like, you know, just like standing there. They're kind of a little bit, right? If we're looking at an actual flag, they look kind of, you know, warbly sometimes. So you know, let's move it to the side a little bit, right? You know, so it's just staying true to like the heart of each poem, right? Um, you know, it's kind of what I like to do, and then you know, the hard part is like whenever you're now making a book and like putting all of those things together, and you're like, why did I do all of this? Right? I could have just written it normally, but then again, you can't, right? So, yeah.
All
Yes.
poets are a little bit masochistic. We wouldn't do it otherwise. Well, you've written the book. It's an amazing book. And to close this out, we didn't have this section when the last time you were here. But what we like to do is like as a final question, as you're thinking about the future, right? Your new book is coming out. Your little girl's about to turn 4. Who knows what else is on the horizon? A collection of short stories, maybe.
Yes.
10 years from now, yes.
Sure, that's in the future. As you look at the next chapter of your life, what would be the title of the poem for the next chapter of your life?
Whoa. You could have prepped me for this one.
You could have prepped yourself.
Oh.
I know. Poets are also a little bit sadistic. I'm so sorry. This is we have apologized to every poet we've had on. We know how hard titles are for poets.
Yeah. Oh, not just hard for me, not just even hard, because it is hard, but also like, ah, I love titles. So I'm like, wow, if I say, uh, yeah, well, I'm gonna let y'all deal with it. I'm gonna think about it. I'll say one, and then between now and the rest of the year, you'll be getting emails from me updating the title.
Yes.
So just be aware.
I signed up for this. I'm here for it.
Yes.
My God, that is so hard. That is a hard question. The next phase of my life. Ah, man. We'll go for a very simple title. We'll say Windows.
Windows.
We'll say Windows. Yeah.
That's not what I thought you would go. It's so.
We'll say Windows. Yeah.
Gusta. Oh, okay. I don't even know if I want you to explain it. I just want to sit with that.
I do. I want to sit with that too. I want to stay with it. I want to stay with it.
Oh,
Windows. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Ayo, for this incredible conversation and your incredible work. The book is Autobiomythography, coming out from Alice James Books on September 10th of this year. So make sure if you're listening to this, you go and you pre-order that book now. Immediately, like just stop the podcast.
Yes.
We don't have to listen to the rest of the episode. Just go order it now. But if people want to get a hold of you, if you want to if people want to find you, if you want to be found, people do that.
I mean, if you type my name, you'll find all of the places that I'm at. But if you want to grab a hold of me on Instagram and Twitter, it's Mr. AFALOMO. So, but if you type my name,
You're around.
Yes.
I'm on the internet.
That's a flex. You're like, Google me.
Yes.
Google me. I know Jericho Brown's Twitter thing just says Google me.
That's amazing.
So I didn't know Jericho Brown did this, but I legitimately in writing bios for the shows that I do, I was just like, his work is out there. Google him. I really wrote that into my bio because I was like, I don't know what to tell you all.
Yeah, Google is your friend. If you don't know who Jericho Brown is, yeah, go ahead. You'll know.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Yeah, this has been a very wonderful conversation.
No, thank you so much, Ayo. This was great. It was again to have a reunion after such different points of your life, right?
Transition. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't believe it's been already 4 years, right? It's been about 4 years.
That's wild, yeah.
We'll see you in 4 more years.
Yes.
When the short story collection comes out.
Yes.
Here for it. No, warms my heart. Thank you again, Ayo.
Thank you so
you
much.
Both. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh man, what? It's like talking to an old friend, right?
It is. He's also so easy to talk to because he's just such a sweet and warm soul. And now I also think a little bit mischievous. That last poem, I was like, okay,
Right. I'm telling you, he's brilliant. For the listeners, I've been saying since we first interviewed him, he's been brilliant. Since we first interviewed him, he's been one of my favorite poets too. And then he just gets more and like, I don't know how he gets better every time. It is the myth of Ayo for him to just like be larger than life every time he does drop something. So.
And now I'm inspired to like go make shit up.
Right? Oh my gosh. Yes. What is our myth? What are the stories that we want to create for our generations?
Oh, yeah. The myth is that we are full-time podcasters with a staff of 10.
Oh, yes.
Social manager that's putting together a Spotify playlist.
Yes. And then, our day jobs are actually our part-time jobs. This is our main one. We just want a little bit of income from our other jobs,
Yeah, for sure. No, but this has been quite a journey. I know we're kind of wrapping up season 4, but the journeys that we go on this podcast, we do it for ourselves, but we do it for the listeners too. And we try to share the work of the amazing poets on here as much as possible. So let's thank some people and get on out of here.
Yes, please. First of all, I want to say thank you to the listeners, because without you, we would not be here. You've been with us for 4 seasons and hopefully more for the upcoming ones as well. So thank you. We can't do this without you.
And our thank you to the producer of our theme music. Our theme music is produced by Chris Condé, who recently was written up on Rolling Stone. So shout out to amazing queer artists from South Texas who now live in New York and travel the world. Go check them out.
Also, thank you to Write Art Out and the City of San Antonio Department of Arts and Culture, whose support has helped us produce this podcast.
Don't forget to follow us on IG and Twitter at Words and Shh. And you can also follow at Gemini's Productions for other Gemini's Productions podcasts.
Yes. And watch or listen past episodes on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts from. Really, anything.
We in these streets. Don't forget to like, subscribe, rate, review. It really helps get the word out about the show, as well as more people find out about the show, and then more people find out about your favorite poets and your favorite poets. So do that. Until next time, people, take care of yourselves.
And stay magical.